All right, I think we are live. So today, this is part three of this food addiction series where I'm sharing my addiction story. I was a food addict or someone who struggled with food addiction. If you learned in my last live about this, my last video, that I didn't identify it like that, and that's a total thinking pattern. But we're going to be talking today about what actually creates food addiction. Last video, if you missed it, we talked about how to identify the addictive cycle in your brain and if you're addicted to food and what it's like, some of the impact that it has on your life and your body. So today in this video, I want to talk about the actual cycles of the brain or what happens in the brain that makes us addicted to food. Because again, you might say, well, I'm totally addicted to sugar. But if I said, all right, are you a food addict? You'd go, well, no. Or like, let's go to a 12-step group. You'd be like, no, I'm not really addicted to food. But in the last video, I talked about how you can know. I went through about 8 or 9 different things like you eat food even though you know you shouldn't. You eat when you're full. You crave food after you're full. You eat till you're like excessively full. You do it even though you know it's like bad and you're already gaining weight. So a bunch of different things that you can go or that we went through that you can identify if you're actually struggling with food eating, hiding food from others. You repeat failures at setting rules, feeling guilty but doing it again anyway later. So anyway, this one, let's jump in. I want to jump right in. Again, I've been a food addict my whole life, pretty much. I didn't know that all growing up, but definitely into my later years in college, and still, something that I work on every day. But I went to 12-step groups for a long time, was a facilitator, and coached people through it. And this is actually one of the major components of helping people think the right way. There's basically a couple of things you have to do to get the body to lose weight permanently. And one of them is thinking healthily. The second is actually getting healthy, and that includes the thinking healthy. So we have to address the physical components and the mental components. And that's what we're talking about in this video, is all the food addiction, emotional side of things. So let's jump in. I'm actually going to share here some cycles that happen in the brain that actually make us addicted to food. There's 3 different cycles we're going to go through. And then in our next live, I'm going to actually show you how to break these cycles so you can actually overcome sugar addiction, food addiction, and all that kind of stuff so that you can actually be in control of your food choices. So let me know if you're here. If you find this helpful, like I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Like I'm sharing here, I'm like getting a little emotional, sharing some deep level stuff here. And I'd love to know your guys' thoughts if you're watching this, if this is helpful, if it's boring, if it's like you don't care, like let me know. I don't have to make these. I'm mostly doing this to help you guys. So and I'm happy to share my story, and I know other people are struggling as well. I was overweight. I tried a lot, couldn't get where I wanted to, and then lost the 50 pounds, kept it off now for 7 years, and I still eat treats. I still eat snacks. It doesn't mean that I don't ever do that. In fact, I do it really often if you ever listen to me. But you just have to do it the right way. So let's dive in. I'm actually sharing my screen here with you guys. So let me pull this up, and I'll show you these addictive cycle patterns, and we're going to actually go through this. So hopefully you guys can actually see this. This is just on Keynote. I put these together so you can kind of see what's happening here. So this is the first one that actually causes addiction in the brain. And this is true with anything. It could be food, porn, cocaine, alcohol, tobacco, gambling, shopping, like you name it, video games, same thing, okay? So the first thing that happens, and hopefully this all shows up right, I put this together pretty fast. So first thing is you eat food, okay? So again, this is what creates the addictive cycle, and this is important to understand to overcome it. You can't really overcome it unless you actually understand some of this cycle. It's really, really difficult. So first thing that happens is you eat the food, right? Then what happens is your brain increases dopamine. So dopamine is a feel-good response in your body that helps your brain feel good. We do it like when we get it when we hold hands, when we eat food, when we, exercise, right? It helps us feel good. So dopamine is produced, and that's a good thing. It's what actually helps us eat food more often and helps us survive because it feels good. Well, when you do this, it floods the frontal lobe with dopamine. So your frontal lobe is basically your brake pedal for your brain. It kind of puts the brakes on. It's kind of like your moral compass, essentially. It's like, oh, I shouldn't just punch that guy because I'm mad at him. or I shouldn't just like steal from the grocery store even though I want that. I should like, buy it first, right? It's your brake pedal. Now, some foods are going to do this more than others. Most food does it, but you're going to get a way bigger response with dopamine in the frontal lobe with things like sugary foods, carbohydrates that turn into sugar, chemical-filled foods, very processed foods, things that have a combination of fat, sugar, salt, and chemicals like MSG or other artificial flavors and things like that. Those are really, they actually call that food porn is the technical term for it, because it's such a combination of foods that are ingredients like fat, salt, sugar, and chemicals that make our brains more addicted to it, that flood our brain more with dopamine. And they actually are, I think I've said this in probably every live that we're doing about this, but they're rearranging the addictive substances, like what's the most addictive thing out there. And they look at things and they kind of classify it. Pornography and sex is actually one of the highest or hardest addictions, most addictive thing out there. But food, they're actually kind of putting above that now. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, it's natural to eat food as it is, obviously to be sexual, and both are used for survival. But it's hard because food's everywhere. It's socially acceptable. It doesn't seem bad, but it also has this really crazy addictive cycle in the brain, as well as like we're bringing in gut bacteria, which I'm not actually even talking about in this. But when you eat bad foods, it feeds bad bacteria, and there's more neurotransmitters in your gut than there are in your brain. And so your bad bacteria sends signals to your brain via those neurotransmitters that it wants more of that same food that it feeds off of. So really complex stuff, but this is the general idea. You eat food, it makes you feel good, that floods your frontal lobe with the feel good stuff. Then what happens over time, now this doesn't happen just immediately, like if you're eating a salad or whatever, this doesn't happen as big. Let's say you have a ding dong or you have a soda. This could be like not even sugary soda. It could be diet soda. This could be whatever sweet out there, whatever treat out there. This could be bread. This could be whatever, right? So you do this more and more and more over time, and your brain, your frontal lobe realizes, wait a second, dopamine's good, but at high levels, and this is happening often, that's not good. So what it does is it starts to shut down. And it basically stops receiving or responding to the dopamine. And what happens is what's called cortical hypofrontality. Technical term, here's what it means. So it's actually visible shrinkage in the frontal control areas. So like literally your frontal lobe that controls like your higher thinking and your decision making shrinks, it atrophies because it has to, because it doesn't want all that dopamine and knows it's not okay. And so what happens is it leads to moral judgment being impaired, and essentially your brake pads of your brain wear out. So instead of saying, oh, I probably shouldn't eat that, I've already had 3 or 4, I'm already full, or I'm overweight, I should probably not keep drinking this or eating this or whatever, it doesn't do that anymore. Your frontal lobes wear out. And so it stops having this kind of like brake pedal that says, whoa, 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 this isn't okay. And this is true with drugs, alcohol, again, porn, whatever. So, whoops. Hit the wrong button. All right. So we're on cortical hypofrontality. So then what happens is your brain then says, okay, we need to produce less dopamine. And what that leads to is what's called your pleasure thermostat. So that's basically like, if here's like your normal, I feel good, like you have this kind of thermostat, and like normal stuff makes you feel good, like exercise, holding hands with your loved one, or like eating food in general, or just like like reading a book, like going for a walk, like simple normal stuff makes you feel good. Well, that increases. So here's all the normal stuff, but because you had such a high from dopamine, normal stuff doesn't feel good anymore. So you have to eat more food, which is the next, oh my gosh, I keep hitting the wrong button, which is the next step in order to get the same high. Okay. So this is really fascinating. That your brain literally shuts down certain processes that it doesn't work anymore and doesn't want it. And so your brain doesn't feel as good anymore and has to keep pumping you full of the same thing that made you feel good. Now, what's even further interesting about it is they're finding new and more research about this, that when you don't feel good, and I should have put a slide in there, but when you don't feel good, this is really critical to understand. Your brain wants to make you feel good, okay? And so if you, like, let's say you have poor energy, or you have, like, you're stressed, or you have like back pain or something, right? If you use something to make yourself feel better, like let's say you have low energy, so you use like an energy drink, Let's say you're stressed, so you use food. Let's say you're back pain, so you use some painkillers or something, right? Some medication. Well, if your brain likes the high that it gets from those substances or those things of food, and so then what happens is your body says, wait a second, I like that. Your brain says, I like that. And then it wants to recreate what made it get that. So when you have low energy and you use an energy drink to fix it, your body will create low energy. So you're creating chronic fatigue. When you have chronic pain and you use medication to fix it, your brain wants the medication, so it creates more pain to get it. Really, really fascinating. When you're stressed and you eat food, your brain creates more stress and a stress response in your body to get the food. Okay, so that's this part of this same cycle because of that dopamine response that's happening. So that's the first cycle. It's super important to understand when you understand how this actually works in the body and the brain, because when we talk about in our next video how to break this is going to really come into play. So again, your brain literally atrophies. The cool thing, I'll just say this, when they look at scans of the brain, and if you go away from like the crazy foods and this addictive cycle, or say you're dealing with alcohol or pornography or something, the brain can actually repair itself, which is really cool, but it takes change. It takes abstinence, essentially. It takes the ability to actually break free from this. So that's the first cycle. Now let's talk about the next cycle. So this is more like what happens in our thought processes as far as what makes us eat food, or what makes us act out on that. Because a lot of people are like, I don't want to do that. And they're like, well, maybe I should. And then they end up doing it, and then they feel crappy later. So here's what happens. So first you have a thought that you want to eat food, okay? So you think, oh man, that donut looks awesome. Or man, I could really go for some ... whatever. I need a Mountain Dew. I need a donut. I need, whatever it is. So you have the thought. The next step is that you entertain that thought. So like, let's say you're like, yeah, I could really go for like a donut right now. So you think, man, I'll just stop home at the store or whatever. I'll grab one. Or like maybe they're sitting on the desk in front of you at work or in the break room or something. You're like, man, I should just go grab one of those donuts. But no, I shouldn't, but it's not going to be a big deal. Like I'll just have like one, or just like a bite of one, a half of one or something. I'll just like, I'll be good, and I'll like go burn it off in the gym. Like we have all this like justification that starts happening, right? And that's all the entertaining of the thought. So then what happens is you go to a place to act on the thought. Whoops, you can't see thought there. Didn't make the box big enough. So you go to a place to act on it. So you think about it, and you have a thought, and then you think about it more and more and more, and then you actually go there. So let's say you go to the break room, or you stop at 7-Eleven or a Maverick or wherever your gas station is close to you. Or you go to your own cupboard, your own fridge, whatever it is, you go to that place so that you can act out. Now, sometimes this includes isolation. In fact, most of the time. This is where that like hiding eating, like you're going to like go to the store by yourself because like you shouldn't, or you're going to like, I don't know, snack on it alone because like your spouse will get mad at you because you probably should do better. You feel weird about it in front of other people. So, right. So you're going to go to this place where you can actually kind of act out. And isolation is one of these big problems of it. So, that's something to be aware of as well. Then you actually act on the thought. Okay. And then what that does is it makes you have more thoughts about it. And it's kind of a vicious cycle here. So this is one of the process. And you can think about this in any cycle that you've been in, as far as like food or any other substance or things that you're maybe struggling with, is you can kind of look at your own patterns. Like I had a thought like, oh, that donut smells good, or they brought donuts in, or that looks good, or maybe I'll just stop by, or like, oh, I could really go for this. Right. And then you just keep entertaining it, thinking about it. And then you go to that place to act out on it. And then you actually act out on it. So that's another cycle that happens in the brain that continues the cycle, because when you act on it, again, with the dopamine and the first cycle we learned about, it's going to create more thoughts to want it. Your brain's going to actually want that more and more and more. And so then the cycle gets easier and it gets faster. So like at first you might be like, oh, not a big, like it's not a big deal. And you'll sit and entertain these thoughts. And you might do that for an hour. You might have to fight the temptation for a really long time. And the more you break this, the faster it gets. And it's like you don't have to entertain anymore. You just do it. Like there's no thought. You don't even care. It's part of what you do. You enjoy it. And that's a very normal process. You can hear the yelling of my daughter in the back. But this process gets faster and it gets worse the more you go through it. So that's another addictive cycle that we go through. Now, this last one is kind of like the motivation, the like, okay, let's change, let's make some change with weight loss. And this is something you can almost kind of identify, like, do I have this addictive cycle happening in my brain? And you can maybe relate to this cycle when it comes to weight loss and food and motivation, all that stuff. So there's kind of this, like, I'm motivated for change. Like, I want to do it. I'm going to, like, and this happens at the first of the year for a lot of people. It's like, I'm going to join a boot camp. I'm going to, like, hop on a diet. I'm going to get into a program. I'm going to do it with my friends. I got a workout class. I feel really good. Or like, all right, I'm going to set some rules. Like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to eat past like 7 o'clock at night, or, we set all these rules, right? And I've done this too. Like, we feel super motivated for change. Well, then you start changing and you start seeing some really cool progress. You're like, cool, this is awesome. And that motivation starts to waver and wane. And you're like, oh, maybe I'm not so motivated. So you start to lose motivation and you get complacent. Now, sometimes you don't see the results. I just talked with somebody on the phone who she's going to do the program. And she's like, what's the point? I'm killing myself in the gym. I'm eating perfectly. She eats like just like vegetables and proteins and fruit, like just really clean. And she's like, I'm not losing weight. What's the point? I might as well eat crap, right? So like, there's lots of reasons why we lose motivation, but you feel really motivated. You start losing the motivation, or you get complacent. You're just kind of like, whatever. So then you act out. You eat the food. You stop. And sometimes this is just like a one-time event where it's like, oh, I acted out. Crap. I should do better. And sometimes this is like I do this for like 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years. And, oh, maybe it's time to now do something. So because we act out, then we start to feel guilty and we start to gain more motivation. And then that motivation leads to feeling motivated again. And then you cycle back through. And it's very much a cycle. And again, the acting out portion doesn't necessarily, again, it's not an event. Sometimes it's a one event and then you feel guilty and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do good today. But sometimes like we get in these ruts and it's like, man, the last 5 years of my life, I was just like in this rut. It's time to do something about it, right? Or maybe it's 5 weeks, maybe it's 5 days. Like, oh crap, I got to start up again. Maybe I'll start up next month, right? And then like we start intercepting all this with like justification thoughts and like unhealthy relationships with food and our body, because we fail over and over and over again in this cycle, and they become very unhealthy. And we develop all sorts of crazy thought patterns and like really big thinking errors about food and our body. And we think that we can like skip dinner and eat treats instead, or that we can eat this pizza and go burn it off in the gym that night or the next morning. We think that like, and just all sorts of crazy stuff that like is really unhealthy, as we call disordered eating. Just because, some people will say, well, I've got an eating disorder, and they totally understand that they either binge or purge, or they have anorexia or something like that. But most people who are overweight have disordered eating because of this cycle. Because they can't do it. They lose motivation, they act out, they feel guilty, then they're pumped, and like, I'm gonna do it. And think about like maybe your cycle, I know this was for me, this is a yearly cycle. Every January, it's like, okay, I'm gonna get pumped again, and then you lose motivation. Like it's January 31 today. Most people have already lost motivation for their New Year's resolutions. Like, they're not thinking about them anymore. It's like, and some people are like, but they're like feeling like, what's the point? I shouldn't even do this. And it's like, I might as well have pizza again, right? Or whatever. I always use pizza, but whatever it is, right? So this is a yearly cycle. And then a lot of times summer rolls around. So people start thinking about it a month or two before summer. Like, I got a vacation coming up, want to look good in my swimming suit or whatever. A lot of times it happens again, like in the fall when kids go back to school. People are like, okay, like my schedule's going to calm down a little bit. Kids will just be in school. I'll be able to like have time in the day. And it's like a quarterly cycle and a yearly cycle, and sometimes like a decade cycle, right? Like everybody's like, all right, like 10 years, like I got to do something. I'm 30 years old, now, or I'm 40 years old, or I'm 50 years old. It's time for change. Like that 50-year-old mark, like I can't hit that and be this weight, right? So this is a really serious cycle in weight loss that and food addiction that correlates and is very much connected to the two previous cycles we talked about. So hopefully this makes sense for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen share here. Anyway, I hope that makes sense for you guys. And I hope that that sheds some light onto maybe what you've been dealing with, maybe why this is like such a hard thing to deal with and actually overcome, and maybe have a little patience and a little compassion on yourself, and not beat yourself up so much for having given in to food. Know that like a lot of it's not even your fault. Like, the food industry is a really interesting, totally different topic. There's books written on this about how like they're formulating foods And we don't know, like our brains are just like getting addicted to this stuff, and it's really causing a lot of problems for us. So have a little compassion on yourself. This is a real problem. It's actually a disease. It's not just like I don't have willpower thing. It's actually a disease in the brain that actually kind of breaks, or this cycle breaks down certain parts of our brain, the atrophy. It's a total mental game, psychological problem. So when I talk about in my program, like everybody asks me, like, what's your program do? Like, what do you do in your program? There's 4 components. The first is an audit to understand where you're at and what your goals are, and make sure I can help. The second is a mental and emotional reboot. So because I understand this stuff, we're working on this stuff in my program. Like, it's not like you can just be like, oh, I'm going to hop on a diet and I'm going to lose weight forever. Like, this boot camp's going to do it for me. No. Like, if you're dealing, and just remember, if you're overweight, my guess is like a large percentage of people who are overweight, they're dealing with this. It's not like, oh, I'm not addicted to food. It's like, if you're not addicted to food, then stop eating the bad foods and see how it goes. Then you'll know. Like, that's the first indicator of like, do you stress eat? Do you do it even though you know you shouldn't? And then, like, if you believe that you're not addicted to food, then stop eating the foods that you think you're not addicted to and see how it goes. And if you can do it and it's no longer an issue, then you have no problems. You're not addicted. But if you can't do it and you're like, oh, I felt I felt like I couldn't do it or whatever, like I gave back in, you do that, it's an addictive cycle in your brain. So when you understand this, like, you have to reboot that. You have to rewire the brain. Literally, it's called neuroplasticity. You literally have to rewire these neural pathways in your brain to make them function differently. And that's one of the major things we do. The third component of my program is the actual physical side of things, the metabolism reboot, where we actually reboot your metabolism, make sure it's functioning the right way, and make sure that you're addressing the root cause issues of some of these things, like the gut bacteria, your hormones, your stress response, your metabolism, all that kind of stuff. And then the last component, just if you're curious, is all about optimized health and sustainability. So it's about learning not just like, how do I lose the weight, but then how do I keep it off long term, but do it in a way that's sustainable. So you don't have to eat chicken and broccoli all day. You don't have to count calories. You don't have to kill yourself in the gym. A lady I was talking to today, like, spends 1 to 2 hours a day. I don't know the exact time frame, but an hour or two a day, like 5 to 6 days a week. And you don't have to do any of that. Like, you don't have to do those things to lose weight. You can actually eat treats and snacks, and you don't have to, again, keep it into your calories and your macros. So that's one of the things I teach people. And how to optimize all parts of your health, not just nutrition, but it's about exercise as well, but it's also about stress and sleep and relationships and community and how you think and all those components. So anyway, I hope this cycle, or the understanding these cycles, helps. If it does, like this video. I don't know of anybody who's talking about this online. If you do, let me know. Yeah, nobody out there is talking about this. Nobody understands it because most people have never dealt with it and been successful. And then teach other people how to do it. Now, if you get in the 12-step world, maybe a little bit, but that's why my program is literally so effective. It's the most comprehensive program out there, is because we're addressing stuff like this. It's not just like, hey, let me give you like a diet or a food plan or like a weekly meal plan or something like that. Like, fine, that can help, but for long-term weight loss and long-term health, and to become the person you want, because you think losing weight is going to help you become happier. Yes, it might, but I find it from my own experience and from my clients that losing weight is part of it. But if you don't change this, you're still not going to be as happy as you want to be. Yes, it can make you happier, but what the key is to be able to do what you say you're going to do. The reason why people who are overweight often get depressed is because it's a sign, or more of a symptom, that their entire lives they've been doing something they told themselves they wouldn't do, or vice versa. They weren't doing something they said they were going to do. Like, I'm not going to eat that, and you do it anyway. I call it breaking contracts with yourself. So this is the kind of stuff you have to start thinking about. You have to start understanding so that you can actually become the person you want to become, and progress. Now, if you don't care about that, like if you're just fine staying the way you are and getting through life with mediocrity and just like living, like, cool, like, that's fine. You can do that. But my program's not a good fit for you. But if you're a person who wants to continually progress and become better and live on a higher plane of living than you ever had before, it's probably, maybe a good fit for you. So first thing I always do is schedule calls with people. So if that's you, let me know. Message me, email me, you can go on my website, rebootmymetabolism.com/schedule. You can schedule. I might even put it in the link below. But yeah, anyway, I hope this helps. Share it, like it. Super valuable information for people. And I'll see you guys in the next video. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about how to break these cycles. And this isn't like science by Jared. This is like what science is saying, but I've applied it in my own life, and I've learned things, and I've gathered tens of thousands of hours of research and dollars into one place up here, and I'm putting it out there for you guys. So anyway, so hopefully this helps. If it does, thank you. Let me know. And I'll see you guys in the next video.